There is a spider crawling along the matted floor of the room where I sit, not the one which has been so well allegorized in the admirable lines to a spider, but another of the same edifying breed. He runs with heedless, hurried haste. He hobbles awkwardly towards me. He stops. He sees the giant shadow before him, and, at a loss whether to retreat or proceed, meditates his huge foe. But as I do not start up and seize upon the straggling caitiff, as he would upon a hapless fly within his toils, he takes heart and ventures on, with mingled cunning, impudence, and fear. As he passes me, I lift up the matting to assist his escape. I'm glad to get rid of the unwelcome intruder, and shudder at the recollection after he is gone. A child, a woman, a clown, or a moralist a century ago would have crushed the little reptile to death. My philosophy has got beyond that. I bear the creature no ill will, but still I hate the very sight of it. The spirit of malevolence survives the practical exertion of it. We learn to curb our will and keep our overt actions within the bounds of humanity, long before we can subdue our sentiments and imaginations to the same mild tone. We give up the external demonstration, the brute violence, but cannot part with the essence or principle of hostility. We do not tread upon the poor little animal in question, that seems barbarous and pitiful, but we regard it with a sort of mystic horror and superstitious loathing. It will ask another 100 years of fine writing and hard thinking to cure us of the prejudice and make us feel towards this ill-omened tribe with something of the milk of human kindness instead of their own shyness and venom. Nature seems, the more we look into it, made up of antipathies. Without something to hate, we should lose the very spring of thought and action. Life would turn to a stagnant pool, were it not ruffled by the jarring interests, the unruly passions of men. The white streak in our own fortunes is brightened, or just rendered visible, by making all around it as dark as possible, so the rainbow paints its form upon the cloud. Is it pride? Is it envy? Is it the force of contrast? Is it weakness or malice? But so it is that there is a secret affinity, a hankering after evil in the human mind, and that it takes a perverse but a fortunate delight in mischief, since it is a never-failing source of satisfaction. Pure good soon grows insipid, wants variety and spirit. Pain is a bitter sweet, which never surfeits. Love turns, with a little indulgence, to indifference or disgust. Hatred alone is immortal. Do we not see this principle at work everywhere? Animals torment and worry one another without mercy. Children kill flies for sport. Everyone reads the accidents and offenses in a newspaper as the cream of the jest. A whole town runs to be present at a fire, and the spectator by no means exults to see it extinguished. It is better to have it so, but it diminishes the interest, and our feelings take part with our passions rather than with our understandings. Men assemble in crowds with eager enthusiasm to witness a tragedy. But if there were an execution going forward in the next street, as Mr. Burke observes, the theatre would be left empty. A strange cur in a village, an idiot, a crazy woman, are set upon and baited by the whole community. Public nuisances are in the nature of public benefits. How long did the Pope, the Bourbons, and the Inquisition keep the people of England in breath and supply them with nicknames to vent their spleen upon? Had they done us any harm of late? No, but we have always a quantity of superfluous bile upon the stomach, and we wanted an object to let it out upon. How loth were we to give up our pious belief in ghosts and witches, because we like to persecute the one and frighten ourselves to death with the other. It is not the quality so much as the quantity of excitement that we are anxious about. We cannot bear a state of indifference and ennui. The mind seems to abhor a vacuum as much as ever matter was supposed to do. Even when the spirit of the age, that is, the progress of intellectual refinement, warring with our natural infirmities, no longer allows us to carry our vindictive and headstrong humors into effect. We try to revive them in description and keep up the old bugbears, the phantoms of our terror and our hate in imagination. We burn Guy Faux in effigy, and the hooting and buffeting and maltreating that poor tattered figure of rags and straw makes a festival in every village in England once a year. Protestants and Papists do not now burn one another at the stake, but we subscribe to new editions of Fox's Book of Martyrs, and the secret of the success of the Scotch novels is much the same. They carry us back to the feuds, the heartburnings, the havoc, the dismay, the wrongs and the revenge of a barbarous age and people, to the rooted prejudices and deadly animosities of sects and parties in politics and religion, and of contending chiefs and clans in war and intrigue. We feel the full force of the spirit of hatred with all of them in turn. As we read, we throw aside the trammels of civilization, the flimsy veil of humanity. Off, you lendings! The wild beast resumes its sway within us. We feel like hunting animals, and as the hound starts in his sleep and rushes on the chase in fancy, the heart rouses itself in its native lair and utters a wild cry of joy at being restored once more to freedom and lawless, unrestrained impulses. Everyone has his full swing or goes to the devil his own way. Here are no Jeremy Bentham panopticons, none of Mr. Owen's impassable parallelograms. Rob Roy would have spurned and poured 1,000 curses on them. No long calculations of self-interest. The will takes its instant way to its object. As the mountain torrent flings itself over the precipice, the greatest possible good of each individual consists in doing all the mischief he can to his neighbor. That is charming, and finds a sure and sympathetic chord in every breast. So Mr. Irving, the celebrated preacher, has rekindled the old, original, almost exploded hellfire in the aisles of the Caledonian Chapel, as they introduce the real water of the new river at Sadler's Wells, to the delight and astonishment of his fair audience. 'Tis pretty, though a plague, to sit and peep into the pit of Tophet, to play at snapdragon with flames and brimstone. It gives a smart electrical shock, a lively fillip to delicate constitutions, and to see Mr. Irving, like a huge titan, looking as grim and swarthy as if he had to forge tortures for all the damned. What a strange being man is, not content with doing all he can to vex and hurt his fellows here, upon this bank and shoal of time, where one would think there were heartaches, pain, disappointment, anguish, tears, sighs, and groans enough. The bigoted maniac takes him to the top of the high peak of school divinity to hurl him down the yawning gulf of penal fire. His speculative malice asks eternity to wreak its infinite spite in, and calls on the Almighty to execute its relentless doom. The cannibals burn their enemies and eat them, in good fellowship with one another. Meek Christian divines cast those who differ from them but a hair's breadth, body and soul, into hellfire for the glory of God and the good of his creatures. It is well that the power of such persons is not coordinate with their wills. Indeed, it is from the sense of their weakness and inability to control the opinions of others that they thus outdo Termagant, and endeavor to frighten them into conformity by big words and monstrous denunciations. The pleasure of hating, like a poisonous mineral, eats into the heart of religion and turns it to rankling spleen and bigotry. It makes patriotism an excuse for carrying fire, pestilence, and famine into other lands. It leaves to virtue nothing but the spirit of censoriousness and a narrow, jealous, inquisitorial watchfulness over the actions and motives of others. What have the different sects, creeds, doctrines in religion been but so many pretexts set up for men to wrangle, to quarrel, to tear one another in pieces about, like a target as a mark to shoot at? Does anyone suppose that the love of country in an Englishman implies any friendly feeling or disposition to serve another, bearing the same name? No, it means only hatred to the French. or the inhabitants of any other country that we happen to be at war with for the time? Does the love of virtue denote any wish to discover or amend our own faults? No, but it atones for an obstinate adherence to our own vices by the most virulent intolerance to human frailties. This principle is of a most universal application. It extends to good as well as evil. If it makes us hate folly, it makes us no less dissatisfied with distinguished merit. If it inclines us to resent the wrongs of others, it impels us to be as impatient of their prosperity. We revenge injuries, we repay benefits with ingratitude. Even our strongest partialities and likings soon take this turn. That which was luscious as locusts anon becomes bitter as coloquintida, and love and friendship melt in their own fires. We hate old friends, we hate old books, we hate old opinions, and at last we come to hate ourselves. I have observed that few of those whom I have formerly known most intimate continue on the same friendly footing or combine the steadiness with the warmth of attachment. I have been acquainted with 2 or 3 knots of inseparable companions who saw each other 6 days in the week that have broken up and dispersed. I have quarreled with almost all my old friends. They might say this is owing to my bad temper, but they have also quarreled with one another. What is become of that set of whist players celebrated by Elia in his notable epistle to Robert Southey? Esquozan. And now I think of it, that I myself have celebrated in this very volume, that for so many years called Admiral Burney Friend. They are scattered like last year's snow. Some of them are dead or gone to live at a distance, or pass one another in the street like strangers, or if they stop to speak, do it as coolly and try to cut one another as soon as possible. Some of us have grown rich, others poor. Some have got places under government, others a niche in the quarterly review. Some of us have dearly earned a name in the world, whilst others remain in their original privacy. We despise the one, and envy and are glad to mortify the other. Times are changed. We cannot revive our old feelings, and we avoid the sight and are uneasy in the presence of those who remind us of our infirmity and put us upon an effort at seeming cordiality, which embarrasses ourselves and does not impose upon our quondam associates. Old friendships are like meats served up repeatedly, cold, comfortless, and distasteful. The stomach turns against them. Either constant intercourse and familiarity breed weariness and contempt, or if we meet again after an interval of absence, we appear no longer the same. One is too wise, another too foolish for us, and we wonder we did not find this out before. We are disconcerted and kept in a state of continual alarm by the wit of one, or tired to death of the dullness of another. The good things of the first, besides leaving stings behind them, by repetition grow stale and lose their startling effect, and the insipidity of the last becomes intolerable. The most amusing or instructive companion is at best like a favorite volume that we wish after a time to lay upon the shelf. But as our friends are not willing to be laid there, this produces a misunderstanding and ill blood between us. Or if the zeal and integrity of friendship is not abated, or its career interrupted by any obstacle arising out of its own nature, we look out for other subjects of complaint and sources of dissatisfaction. We begin to criticize each other's dress, looks, and general character. Such a one is a pleasant fellow, but it is a pity he sits so late. Another fails to keep his appointments, and that is a sore that never heals. We get acquainted with some fashionable young men or with a mistress and wish to introduce our friend, but he is awkward and a sloven. The interview does not answer, and this throws cold water on our intercourse. Or he makes himself obnoxious to opinion, and we shrink from our own convictions on the subject as an excuse for not defending him. All or any of these causes mount up in time to a ground of coolness or irritation, and at last they break out into open violence, as the only amends we can make ourselves for suppressing them so long, or the readiest means of banishing recollections of former kindness, so little compatible with our present feelings. We may try to tamper with the wounds or patch up the carcass of departed friendship, but the one will hardly bear the handling, and the other is not worth the trouble of embalming. The only way to be reconciled to old friends is to part with them for good. At a distance, we may chance to be thrown back in a waking dream upon old times and old feelings, or at any rate, we should not think of renewing our intimacy till we have fairly spit our spite, or said, thought, and felt all the ill we can of each other. Or if we can pick a quarrel with someone else and make him the scapegoat, this is an excellent contrivance to heal a broken bone. I think I must be friends with Lamb again, since he has written that magnanimous letter to Southey and told him a piece of his mind. I don't know what it is that attaches me to H so much, except that he and I, whenever we meet, sit in judgment on another set of old friends and carve them as a dish fit for the gods. There was L. John Scott, Mrs., whose dark raven locks made a picturesque background to our discourse. B., who is grown fat and is, they say, married. R. These had all separated long ago, and their foibles are the common link that holds us together. We do not affect to condole or whine over their follies. We enjoy, we laugh at them till we are ready to burst our sides, sans intermission for hours by the dial. We serve up a course of anecdotes, traits, master strokes of character, and cut and hack at them till we are weary. Perhaps some of them are even with us. For my own part, as I once said, I like a friend the better for having faults that one can talk about. Then, said Mrs. Ewell, you will never cease to be a philanthropist. Those in question were some of the choice spirits of the age, not fellows of no mark or likelihood. And we so far did them justice. But it is well they did not hear what we sometimes said of them. I care little what anyone says of me, particularly behind my back and in the way of critical and analytical discussion. It is looks of dislike and scorn that I answer with the worst venom of my pen. The expression of the face wounds me more than the expressions of the tongue. If I have in one instance mistaken this expression, or resorted to this remedy where I ought not, I am sorry for it. But the face was too fine over which it mantled, and I am too old to have misunderstood it. I sometimes go up to E.'s, and as often as I do resolve never to go again, I do not find the old homely welcome. The ghost of friendship meets me at the door and sits with me all dinner time. They have got a set of fine notions and new acquaintance. Allusions to past occurrences are thought trivial, nor is it always safe to touch upon more general subjects. M does not begin as he formerly did every 5 minutes. Fawcett used to say, etc. That topic is something worn. The girls are grown up and have 1,000 accomplishments. I perceive there is a jealousy on both sides. They think I give myself airs, and I fancy the same of them. Every time I am asked if I do not think Mr. Washington Irvine a very fine writer, I shall not go again till I receive an invitation for Christmas Day in company with Mr. Liston. The only intimacy I never found to flinch or fade was a purely intellectual one. There was none of the cant of candor in it, none of the whine of mawkish sensibility. Our mutual acquaintance were considered merely as subjects of conversation and knowledge, not at all of affection. We regarded them no more in our experiments than mice in an air pump, or like malefactors, they were regularly cut down and given over to the dissecting knife. We spared neither friend nor foe. We sacrificed human infirmities at the shrine of truth. The skeletons of character might be seen, after the juice was extracted, dangling in the air like flies in cobwebs, or they were kept for future inspection in some refined acid. The demonstration was as beautiful as it was new. There is no surfeiting on gall. Nothing keeps so well as a decoction of spleen. We grow tired of everything but turning others into ridicule and congratulating ourselves on their defects. We take a dislike to our favorite books after a time for the same reason. We cannot read the same works forever. Our honeymoon, even though we wed the muse, must come to an end and is followed by indifference, if not by disgust. There are some works, those indeed that produce the most striking effect, at first by novelty and boldness of outline, that will not bear reading twice. Others of a less extravagant character, and that excite and repay attention by a greater nicety of details, have hardly interest enough to keep alive our continued enthusiasm. The popularity of the most successful writers operates to wean us from them, by the cant and fuss that is made about them, by hearing their names everlastingly repeated, and by the number of ignorant and indiscriminate admirers they draw after them. We as little like to have to drag others from their unmerited obscurity, lest we should be exposed to the charge of affectation and singularity of taste. There is nothing to be said respecting an author that all the world have made up their minds about. It is a thankless as well as hopeless task to recommend one that nobody has ever heard of. To cry up Shakespeare as the god of our idolatry seems like a vulgar national prejudice. To take down a volume of Chaucer or Spenser or Beaumont and Fletcher or Ford or Marlowe has very much the look of pedantry and egotism. I confess it makes me hate the very name of fame and genius when works like these are gone into the wastes of time, while each successive generation of fools is busily employed in reading the trash of the day, and women of fashion gravely join with their waiting maids in discussing the preference between Paradise Lost and Mr. Moore's Loves of the Angels. I was pleased the other day on going into a shop to ask if they had any of the Scotch novels, to be told that they had just sent out the last Sir Andrew Wiley. Mr. Galt will also be pleased with this answer. The reputation of some books is raw and unaired, that of others is worm-eaten and mouldy. Why fix our affections on that which we cannot bring ourselves to have faith in, or which others have long ceased to trouble themselves about? I am half afraid to look into Tom Jones, lest it should not answer my expectations at this time of day, and if it did not, I should certainly be disposed to fling it into the fire and never look into another novel while I lived. But surely, it may be said, there are some works that, like nature, can never grow old, and that must always touch the imagination and passions alike. Or there are passages that seem as if we might brood over them all our lives and not exhaust the sentiments of love and admiration they excite. They become favorites, and we are fond of them to a sort of dotage. Here is one. Sitting in my window. Printing my thoughts in lawn, I saw a god, I thought, but it was you, enter our gates. My blood flew out and back again, as fast as I had puffed it forth and sucked it in like breath. Then was I called away in haste to entertain you. Never was a man thrust from a sheepcote to a scepter, raised so high in thoughts as I. You left a kiss upon these lips then, which I mean to keep from you forever. I did hear you talk far above singing. A passage like this indeed leaves a taste on the palate like nectar, and we seem in reading it to sit with the gods at their golden tables. But if we repeat it often in ordinary moods, it loses its flavor, becomes vapid. The wine of poetry is drank, and but the lees remain. Or on the other hand, if we call in the aid of extraordinary circumstances to set it off to advantage, as the reciting it to a friend, or after having our feelings excited by a long walk in some romantic situation, or while we play with Amaryllis in the shade or with the tangles of Neaera's hair, we afterwards miss the accompanying circumstances, and instead of transferring the recollection of them to the favorable side, regret what we have lost, and strive in vain to bring back the irrevocable hour, wondering in some instances how we survive it, and at the melancholy blank that is left behind. The pleasure rises to its height in some moment of calm solitude, or intoxicating sympathy, declines ever after, and from the comparison and a conscious falling off, leaves rather a sense of satiety and irksomeness behind it. Is it the same in pictures? I confess it is, with all but those from Titian's hand. I don't know why, but an air breathes from his landscapes, pure, refreshing, as if it came from other years. There is a look in his faces that never passes away. I saw one the other day. Amidst the heartless desolation and glittering finery of Fonthill, there is a portfolio of the Dresden Gallery. It opens, and a young female head looks from it. A child, yet woman grown, with an air of rustic innocence and the graces of a princess, her eyes like those of doves, the lips about to open, a smile of pleasure dimpling the whole face, the jewels sparkling in her crisped hair, her youthful shape compressed in a rich antique dress, as the bursting leaves contain the April buds. Why do I not call up this image of gentle sweetness and place it as a perpetual barrier between mischance and me? It is because pleasure asks a greater effort of the mind to support it than pain, and we turn, after a little idle dalliance, from what we love to what we hate. As to my old opinions, I am heartily sick of them. I have reason, for they have deceived me sadly. I was taught to think, and I was willing to believe, that genius was not a bawd, that virtue was not a mask, that liberty was not a name, that love had its seat in the human heart. Now I would care little if these words were struck out of the dictionary, or if I had never heard them. They are become to my ears a mockery and a dream. Instead of patriots and friends of freedom, I see nothing but the tyrant and the slave, the people linked with kings to rivet on the chains of despotism and superstition. I see folly join with knavery, and together make up public spirit and public opinions. I see the insolent Tory, the blind reformer, the coward Whig. If mankind had wished for what is right, they might have had it long ago. The theory is plain enough, but they are prone to mischief, to every good work reprobate. I have seen all that had been done by the mighty yearnings of the spirit and intellect of men, of whom the world was not worthy, and that promised a proud opening to truth and good through the vista of future years, undone by one man, with just glimmering of understanding enough to feel that he was a king, but not to comprehend how he could be king of a free people. I have seen this triumph celebrated by poets, the friends of my youth and the friends of man, but who were carried away by the infuriate tide that, setting in from a throne, bore down every distinction of right reason before it. And I have seen all those who did not join in applauding this insult and outrage on humanity proscribed, hunted down, they and their friends made a byword of, so that it has become an understood thing that no one can live by his talents or knowledge who is not ready to prostitute those talents and that knowledge to betray his species and prey upon his fellow man. This was sometime a mystery, but the time gives evidence of it. The echoes of liberty had awakened once more in Spain, and the morning of human hope dawned again. But that dawn has been overcast by the foul breath of bigotry, and those reviving sounds stifled by fresh cries from the time-rent towers of the Inquisition, man yielding, as it is fit he should, first to brute force, but more to the innate perversity and dastard spirit of his own nature, which leaves no room for farther hope or disappointment. And England, that arch reformer, that heroic deliverer, that mouther about liberty and tool of power, stands gaping by, not feeling the blight and mildew coming over it, nor its very bones crack and turn to a paste under the grasp and circling folds of this new monster, legitimacy. In private life do we not see hypocrisy, servility, selfishness, folly, and impudence succeed, while modesty shrinks from the encounter and merit is trodden underfoot? How often is the rose plucked from the forehead of a virtuous love to plant a blister there? What chance is there of the success of real passion? What certainty of its continuance? Seeing all this as I do, and unraveling the web of human life into its various threads of meanness, spite, cowardice, want of feeling, and want of understanding, of indifference towards others and ignorance of ourselves, seeing custom prevail over all excellence, itself giving way to infamy, mistaken as I have been in my public and private hopes, calculating others from myself, and calculating wrong, always disappointed where I place most reliance, the dupe of friendship and the fool of love. Have I not reason to hate and to despise myself? Indeed I do, and chiefly for not having hated and despised the world enough.